I'm Meike Bokhorst. I'm a senior researcher at the Scientific Council for Government Policy and also a researcher at Utrecht University.
Great.
My name is Paul van Montford, a researcher at the VU, at Vrije Universiteit, and a colleague of Melanie. You wanted to say something, Melanie? Okay, let us start. I'm going to tell you something about our project about enhancing public accountability. And we did this project with 4 colleagues, Berit Lindeman from Wisselwerkers, Nienke Kuitenbrouwer from the Utrecht University, and Meike, who's here. And I tell you first, okay, let's, you're covering a part of my slides, so that's better. Let me start to tell you something about the background of this project. The background is maybe started about 10 or 20 years ago when politicians, people, and policymakers started to call for more transparency by school boards, because a lot of public money went to the school boards, and a lot of extra public money went to the school boards, and people wanted to know what was happening about this money. But people also policymakers want to know more about how school boards involve internal and external stakeholders in their policy making. And of course, everybody wants to know how school boards and schools perform. So transparency was needed, and there was a broad call for more transparency in society. And that was also the reason why the Council for Secondary Education, the VO-raad, and the Council for Primary Education, the PO-raad, asked us, the research team, for advice. How can public accountability of school boards be enhanced? It was a very practical question, but it was also a question with a scientific relevance, because it gave us more insight in the organizational learning and legitimizing processes within schools and school boards. Learning in the sense of organizational learning to become accountable. That's what we are talking about now. And it also gave us an insight in the gap, and also in the difficulty to close this gap between the language of the boardroom, the goals and ambitions and mission statements and so on, and the language of the classroom. It's often a very different language. What did we do? The project started in 2019 and will end in March 2021. We had 2 surveys. It's better to say we had 1 survey in 2019 and we will have one in 2021. About ambitions, challenges, and bottlenecks in public accountability. And the survey in 2019 formed the basis for our action research, about which I will talk later. More than 100 school boards reacted, so it was a very good response. And we are a bit afraid that this response will be much lower in the survey we will do in 2021 because of the corona thing, and people are not thinking so much about accountability anymore, pitiful enough. So we're a bit hesitating about this survey in 2021. We did also a literature analysis about the theoretical concepts and recent research about accountability. And the most important element of our research was the action research that we did. We made 4 action networks about 4 themes of accountability and learning, accountability and stakeholder involvement, accountability and the steering cycle, and so on. 4 networks around specific topics. And these were action networks with group board members, groups from in which board members, controllers, and directors participated. And in total, about 20 to 25 participants participated in these action networks. So I think about 15 or 20 school boards were represented in those action networks. Not bad, I think. And they brought in specific accountability issues which they encountered in their specific school board. And we work together to solve these issues in these action networks. We also organize 6 action research projects, and these are individual projects with individual boards, also on specific accountability issues. And besides this, we made an analysis of 10 good practice annual reports, including interviews with the chairmen of the boards that made those annual reports. So I think that we got a lot of data to learn about accountability issues at the moment, and also about new topics of new ways to solve these accountability issues. So it's very action research is at the center of this project, because it's very different from the project that we discussed before. It was very quantitative, and this is very qualitative. We used 3 theoretical starting points about which I want to tell you very shortly a bit. And the reason is that we are convinced, on the basis of a literature study and on the basis of interviews that we had, that the full potential of accountability can only be utilized if we take 4 perspectives on accountability into account, if we relate accountability issues to the creation of public value, if we connect it with public value creation, and if accountability is part of a learning organization. So I'll tell you a bit more about these theoretical perspectives. As I said, to use the full potential of public accountability, we need to use a broad perspective on what accountability is. And we used the literature of Mark Bovens and Thomas Gillemans. They use 4 perspectives on accountability. The democratic perspective, that's accountability that enables control and supervision. The constitutional perspective, in which accountability contributes to check and balance in and around an organization. The cybernetic perspective, in which accountability contributes to a learning organization. And the administrative perspective, in which accountability contributes to legitimacy, to better legitimacy in the environment of the organization. So these are 4 perspectives that we should keep in mind if we want to work on accountability issues. If we only would focus on the democratic perspective and we wouldn't pay attention to the other perspectives, we wouldn't use the full potential of what accountability can be and how useful accountability can be. The second theoretical perspective is maybe known by you, the theoretical model of Mark Moore about public value creation. And to keep it very short, this model, the theory says that what an organization wants to achieve, the public value proposition, the operational capacities that an organization has, and the legitimizing environment have to be in balance with each other. If you want something, but you don't have the means to realize it, it won't happen. If you want something, a public value proposition, and your environment wants you to do something very different, it will not happen. So these 3 things have to be in balance in this model if you want to create a public value. And what's a public value? That differs from school to school. It can be personal development of pupils and teachers. It can be knowledge transfer. It can be socialization, and so on. But what's important in this model is that these 3 elements have to be in a kind of balance with each other. And accountability, your accountability, should tell you something about these 3 elements and about the degree and the way in which they are in balance, or they are balanced or not. That's the circle at the right side of this slide. And that's what accountability should tell you something about. The third one is the theory of learning organization. And this is an elaboration or a focus on the cybernetic perspective of accountability. And if you connect accountability issues with the theory of a learning organization, you will see that accountability can contribute to both single loop learning and double loop learning. It can contribute to reflection, internal reflection within an organization, or reflection between organizations. And the chance that accountability contributes to learning is greater the more accountability is in line with a sense of urgency. This sense of urgency is there, as we will see, and a sense of purpose. It must make sense to be accountable and to be held accountable. These are the three theoretical perspectives that led our research. I skipped to the jumped to the results of the research. We had some direct benefits, of course. That's the consequence of our research approach. We developed in those action research practices. We developed new practices at individual schools. We developed new practices. So one of the schools, for example, organized an accountability day at school to talk with the whole organization from the top to the bottom about accountability issues. About which should we be accountable, how should we account ourselves, how can we organize the stakeholder dialogue, and so on. Other participants made different versions of their annual report, one for the accountant and one for the stakeholders. Some other participants invested in improving the connection between mission statements and goals and so on, concrete performances and accountability, and the way they accounted for this. There were also some indirect revenues because the action research meetings led to an exchange of tips and tricks, so to say, 8 core questions for public accountability, and it led also to good practices. As one of the participants called it, a praatplaat discussion chart on which accountability issues were presented, and that was used to have a good discussion with stakeholders, internal and external. And also we disseminated the revenues of our project in the sector via the so-called VO-katern. One of the important revenues is the development of an accountability scan, and we made an instrument for self-evaluation by schools concerning ambitions, views, and the state of affairs about accountability in their own organization, because we thought we found out that it often are one or two persons or one group of persons within a school that's very concerned about accountability, and the rest of the school isn't concerned about it, or thinks different about accountability issues. And this accountability scan is a very simple scan. You can fill it in, and within 10 minutes, and give you an impression about how within the school people think about accountability issues, what they think that's important, how far they think they are as a school with their accountability, and so on. So it can help you to start a discussion about accountability. Reflection on the research project. It appears to be very difficult in practice to make a connection between ambitions and operational goals on the one side and accountability on the other side. We often say that the discussions about accountability are discussions in the boardroom, discussions between board members and controllers, or discussions between board members and accountants, but they don't reach the organization. And so the accountability discussion within the schools that we had in our action research is often a kind of standalone discussion without a connection between the strategic goals of the schools and the performances of the schools. This was for me a bit surprising, but it appears in practice to be very difficult to make this connection between strategic issues and accountability issues. The goodwill, the sense of urgency, very important for learning, and the momentum for improving accountability is already there for 5-6 years, I think. But there are 3 barriers we found out. There are internal obstacles, the way from wanting to doing. The how is very important and very problematic, often very problematic. And the theme quickly falls off the agenda. Other matters take precedence. Tell you a bit more about these three to conclude my presentation. And this leads to recommendations for both schools, the branch organization, VO-raad, PO-raad, and the government. So I'll tell you a bit more about these three obstacles, these three barriers. Internal obstacles. What is said before is that the chairman of the board or the controller or somebody who's very concerned about accountability in the organization is often a standalone actor. There's often a lack of support base within the organization. There's internal resistance because accountability issues often are connected in the mind of people with red tape and with time-consuming but quite useless activities. And there are differences of opinion within an organization. Maybe the members of the board or the board chairman or the controller has very specific ideas of how accountability should look, but he lacks the support often he lacks support in his organization for his or her ideas. And we recommend to use the accountability scan to discuss the state of art and the internal ambitions concerning accountability issues, to start the discussion and to find out whether there is a support base for improving accountability, or whether there is internal resistance, or whether there are differences of opinion. This accountability scan can help you to discuss this in a very simple way in your organization. Then the second one is from wanting to doing. Willing is not the same as being able to do. The how seems to be very problematic. Speaking for myself, this was also a bit surprising. How to organize a stakeholder dialogue, how to make a meaningful annual report still is problematic for many organizations, and that's people, school boards need to be helped to organize. They're willing and they feel a sense of urgency, but they are not able. They're struggling with the how. So we recommend for the PO and VO Council to stimulate learning in learning communities, share best practices and tools for meaningful public accountability, organize teaching facilities about accountability issues. The third one, the lack of sense of urgency. There is a kind of sense of urgency, but if there are other topics coming up, like the corona thing now for the moment, other topics are considered to be more urgent. That's sounds a bit paradoxical, but when we started this project, it was maybe a kind of quiet period in education land, and then everybody said, yes, accountability is very important and we have to invest it and we have to spend some time in improving it. But now there are other topics and it falls off of the agenda. On one hand, we can understand that, but on the other hand, the choices you make as a school or a school board in this corona time are very important, not only for you as a school, but also for the pupils, for everybody. So you have to account for it, for what you're doing. So we recommend to the Ministry of Education, try to keep this topic on the political agenda, offer maybe seed money to stimulate experiment and sharing of good practices, and the Inspectorate keep an eye on the way that school boards invest in dialogue, learning and accountability. That's where I want to end my presentation.